I think, if as long as everything works when I get back up there and can project, I think we should be fine.
Okay. All right.
Standing for the jury, please. So I don't think the interrogatories have that language. So I took that out. Honestly, I'm not sure why the verdict do, but shit.
For the jury.
Placing the trail on that one, so. Be seated, everybody. We are on the record. Counsel, the parties, and the jury are all present in the courtroom. Fine. And we're ready for defense's opening. Mr. Richardson, please.
Thank you. Yeah, you're on.
Yes.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Thank you so much for your participation in this matter. Over the next few days, you're going to become very familiar with the story of this case in a way that you'll likely remember for the rest of your lives. Jury trials, jury participation is quite rare. As you guys saw during part here this morning, hardly anybody participated in a jury trial before. Because this is new to you, I'm going to ask that you set aside any preconceptions that you may have gained from watching TV or movies or any other sort of popular media, and that you stick to the court's instructions and hear the evidence and then consider the outcome. You've heard a story from plaintiff's counsel. They want you to think this is all a easy thing. They want you to take your eyes off the documents. But that's not what's going on here. There are lots of signed agreements demonstrating the intent of the parties in this matter. The plaintiff wants you to take your eyes off those documents and believe statements that were not part of the court record at the time or part of the party's record at the time, nor were they part of sworn testimony during plaintiff's deposition. So let's begin. The story is about two people who have known each other for a long time. They were high school friends. The parties were friends, maybe close friends for a long time. Joanna felt like the plaintiff was like a brother to her. Mother also treated him like a son. Joanna purchased the property, the mothership, you've heard it called, in 2011. And in 2015, plaintiff moved into Joanna's home as a tenant and as a roommate, nothing more. He was working for Merrill Lynch at the time. You guys are aware, it's an investment advisory firm. While working there, plaintiff discovered some information that he thought he could exploit for personal gain. The problem was that if he did it himself, he was afraid Merrill Lynch would find out that those loopholes might close or that he might get fired. So what did he do? He went to his friend Joanna and asked her for help. They agreed that she would invest this $94,000 in an account in her name, but according to his instructions, and that they would split the profits 50-50. Simple. Except Joanna later became concerned this was an illegal arrangement. You see, the plaintiff was a licensed financial advisor, investment advisor. And as a result, he was subject to many restrictions under the law, securities laws, that made it illegal for him to do this kind of trade. So the parties decided that they would need to alter their agreement. The money that originally came from plaintiff became payment for 25 years worth of rent. Next 25 years, he would live at plaintiff's residence, or sorry, at Joanna's residence without having to pay rent. Yes, the deal was unusual, but he was locking in rent at $300 a month, which is a great deal. The parties agreed also that if he were to move out early, he would do a rescission or undo the contract so he could get money back. But plaintiff later said, no, I want all that money back. Joanna asked if he was moving out and if it was time to rescind the original contract, but he said no, he still wanted to continue living at the mothership for free, but also get his money back, double dip. So once again, the deal was restructured. This time it was a loan to Ms. Sammartinian, which she would pay back with annual payments of $3,500 that included interest. Plaintiff would still have free residence at her property. There was no longer a mention of the investment profits being split. And because the money now belonged to Joanna, the profit made from it would also belong to her. The last version of their agreement was called the roommate agreement and included the following clause. This agreement supersedes all prior or contemporaneous negotiations, commitments, agreements, written or oral, and writings between the parties with respect to the subject matter hereof. All such negotiations, commitments, agreements, and writings will have no further force or effect, and the parties to any such other negotiation, commitment, agreement, or writing will have no further rights or obligation thereunder. Maybe you've seen language like that before in a contract or negotiation you've had in your own life. We call that a superseding clause. That means that all other negotiations have been terminated and only the four corners of that document are now enforced. Well, Ms. Sammartinian kept her part of the bargain under that agreement that was signed in June 2017, not May 2018, 2018, June 2017. And to date, she's paid yearly payments totaling $28,000 to plaintiff on that contract, which he has gratefully accepted. The other part of this case is that Ms. Sammartinian's claim against plaintiff regarding a deal they made in 2020. You've heard plaintiff's version of that, but here's what really happened. Plaintiff approached Ms. Sammartinian at the time with an investment proposal. This time, let's take the equity out of the house and invest it according to his instructions. And in 30 years, they'd have over $10 million. He made charts to show her how much money she could make if she followed his plan, and it sounded pretty good to her. So she tried to get a second mortgage on the property, but was denied. Plaintiff later came up with another idea for Ioana to access the equity in her property. Let's structure it as a sale. With one big caveat, he promised, even though his name would now be on the title and the mortgage, the property would remain hers. It would be as though she did a home equity loan on the property, but in his name. The only reason Ioana agreed to this deal at all was because of his promise that regarding her continued ownership of the property, it would always be hers. It was not either party's intent that plaintiff would get any ownership interest in the property, even though his name would be on the title. It was for a limited purpose only, for the financing of this 2020 mortgage. Plaintiff also made the same promise to Ioana's mother, a co-owner of the home, that even though the paperwork, the title would say his name, Ioana would still remain the owner of the property. Because of this promise to Ioana and her mother, and because of the immense trust that Ioana had in plaintiff, they didn't even write this promise down at the time. Ioana's home had significant amount of equity in it. From this transaction, she was able to net $175,000. The parties agreed that she would immediately turn around and invest this money. They would split the profits and the mortgage payment. So not just the benefit, but also the obligation, 50-50. The parties performed under this agreement for years, with plaintiff never questioning that Ioana was the owner of the property. He even signed Ioana's lease agreements with her tenant, affirming year after year that Ioana was the owner or the landlord of the property. So how did we get here if this deal was so great? Well, in 2023, plaintiff claimed that the house was no longer Ioana's, but was his. And he took out a second mortgage on the property for $115,000. It did start several months earlier with plaintiff claiming equity in the property that belonged to him. The value of the home had grown by about $100,000, and plaintiff wanted that money. When Ms. Sammartinian objected, reminding him that this was her property, not his, therefore she was entitled to benefit from its growth in value, not him. Well, Ioana feared that plaintiff was reneging on his promise. She requested that plaintiff give her written reassurance of his 2020 promise that she would remain the owner of the property. And in November 2022, the parties signed an affirmation of that 2020 deal about the house. It states that both parties agree that the name on the title or deed does not reflect true ownership interest in the property, and that no ownership interest changed as a result of the 2020 transaction. Plaintiff also repeatedly promised that he would not take any action regarding the property without Ioana's permission. That should have resolved the matter. That sounds pretty definitive. But just months later, plaintiff sent Ioana a text message in which he claimed the property for himself and exerted control over it. He told her that he had been letting her stay there currently as a courtesy, and he got work done on the property against her wishes. Then, to make matters worse, he took out a $115,000 loan against the property without her knowledge and without her consent. At that point, Ms. Sammartinian realized that she had put her trust in the wrong person. The parties had negotiations for months about how to unwind these two deals. They did not come to an agreement on how to do so. When the negotiations failed, the 2017 written contract was still in effect. So Ioana continued to pay the annual payments of $3,500. that she believes she owed the plaintiff. She did not steal plaintiff's money. She performed under the agreement that the parties had been operating under and performing under for years. So, what are we asking you guys to decide? The first thing is we want you to decide that the 2017 roommate agreement replaced any prior agreements that the parties had related to that $94,000. And two, we want you to decide that plaintiff was never the owner of that mothership property, and that any loans or other money that he took out of that property was improper, because he didn't have the right to do that. He was merely like a trustee of the property. You know that a trustee has to act for the benefit of the beneficiary. So that's the long and the short of it. There's two sides of this story, and so plaintiff is going to get to present their side first. But it's really important that you withhold judgment until both sides tell the story. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Your first witness, please, Mr. Hannell.
Yes, I'd like to call Zubair Husseini to the stand, and I'd like to move my computer up to that podium.
Sure, feel free.
Thank you.
They're coming up. You can leave the, sir, Mr. Hannell, you can leave the lectern there if you want, or you can move it. It's up to you.
Yes, I think I will move it. Let me see about that. I definitely need it to be connected here.
Get you sworn in before you sit down. Raise your right hand.
Solemnly swear the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Please be seated.
Good morning, Ms. Husseini. Could you please state your full name for the record?
It's afternoon, but yes, my full name is Mahtab Shah Zubair Husseini. I usually go by my middle name, Zubair.
And what's the background of that name? It's unusual.
It's Afghan. So I come from that side of the world. I was born right outside of the border in a city called Quetta.
And your family's background is from Afghanistan?
Yeah, they gave me a traditional Afghan name. My mom's from the big city in the south called Kandahar, and my dad's from a smaller city, a village, I guess, called Helmand.
And they eventually came here to the United States?
Yeah, so I was born there in 1988, and they came when I was 2 years old in 1990. They were trying to escape the Russians. That was the country that was invading Afghanistan back then.
Briefly touch upon, kind of your experience. You grew up as American, I assume, but can you touch upon a little bit about your family's adjustment to the United States?
Yeah, sure. So I'm an American. I consider myself one, but English wasn't my first language. When my parents came here, they weren't fluent in it. They didn't have family here. They didn't have friends. And, I don't want to make a big deal of it because this is what every immigrant goes through. But there was a clear sense that we were different from the kids at school, from our neighbors, from everyone else.
You went to high school here?
Yeah, right here in the Valley. I went to Peoria High School on the west side, and that's actually where I met. I'm going to call her Iwana. That's what I called her when we lived together. That's what I'm going to call her here.
Where'd you go to high school?
Peoria High School.
And what was your year of graduation?
I graduated in 2006.
And you went to college?
Yeah, right away. So that was always the plan. My parents weren't going to let me do anything else.
And you went to ASU?
Yeah, me and Iwana both went to ASU.
At ASU, what did you study?
So I studied physics. I was good at math, but I was a bit of an airhead. And the other kids, were thinking about what made the most money or what they wanted to spend their lives doing. I honestly thought at 18 that physics was my best path to superpowers. Like that's how it happens in the comic books, and that's how I chose my major.
Say you like science or science fiction?
They kind of blend together, I think, for me.
How would you describe your life a bit, just briefly in college? What was that like?
I was a nerd, so I didn't socialize like the other kids. I didn't go to the parties. It wasn't like Spring Break or some of the other college movies. So in freshman and sophomore year, I didn't drink, I didn't smoke. I went to class. I still lived with my parents, so I commuted back to Peoria. It's like an hour drive. Um, Kept to myself. Yeah, a nerd, a loner.
Where did you, in college, you eventually reconnected with the defendant. You said you had met her in high school first?
Yeah, we first met in AP US history. Like I noticed her because she's beautiful. We didn't talk very much in high school, but in college, we reconnected because I went vegan and she was like the president of the vegetarian club on campus.
Did you join that vegetarian club?
Yeah, I helped her run it for several years.
What kinds of things did you do together in and out of the club?
So we were some people might call us annoying, but we were the people that handed out leaflets that tell you where your food comes from. We organized with like vegan restaurants in the area to bring vegan food to campus. We did some movie showings, just spreading awareness, I guess.
If you can approximate just roughly, how much time were you spending with the defendant in a week?
So I never thought of it like a job, so I never did it by week. But like, I mean, we met up after class almost every day, probably for like 3 or 4 hours. We'd smoke, so I started smoking marijuana when we started hanging out, and we talk and just spend time together.
In terms of the sort of level of trust you had in her, could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I started trusting her almost immediately. It was really quick, and I don't know why. Maybe it's because stuff was hard at home, or maybe it's because she was pretty. But I trusted her. Like, in those first few months when we were spending every day together, and over the 14 years that we spent together, like I'd say that my trust in her was absolute.
Did you ever ask to, do you ever have romantic feelings for her?
Yeah, I fell in love with her pretty quickly.
Did you ever ask her to date you?
Yeah, early, like probably May of 2009, like a few months after we'd been hanging out. She turned me down. She said she didn't think of me in that way.
In terms of, thereafter, after she declined to date you, how were you supposed to continue?
I just wanted to spend time with her. We laughed together, and that was enough for me. So I was happy just being friends, just being around her.
Did she ask you to be friends forever?
Yeah, that was one of the terms that we had. I don't remember if it happened like that summer or like a year or two later, like after we lived some life together. But she asked me to be her forever friend at one point.
Now, when did you graduate from college?
It took me some time. I graduated in 2012.
When did she graduate?
We graduated on time, like in 2010.
In between 2010 and 2012, did you keep in touch?
Yeah, we weren't hanging out every day anymore, but I saw her like 3 or 4 times a week. So we weren't running the vegetarian club at ASU anymore, but we were doing like a community vegetarian club. So we protested against the circus. I think we went into it like quite a few Chipotles to yell at the customers. I was helping out with that.
After her graduation, do you know what she was doing for work or studies?
Yeah, like I said, we talked, like, if not every day, like every other day. She was walking dogs. I think she went to paralegal school for a year, and she wasn't doing anything with her degree, like even though her parents were getting on her case about that.
Did she ever tell you why she chose to work as a dog walker instead of something else?
Yeah, yeah. She gave me a couple of reasons. One of which I really loved. Like I'm a pacifist. One of the first protests I went to was an anti-war protest, and she always said she didn't want to make enough money to where she'd have to pay taxes and fund the wars that we were in. And then also like she just said working 40 hours a week is draining. She couldn't live that lifestyle.
In terms of yourself, what were you doing? You graduated with this physics degree. Did you go into something involving physics?
No, no. So physics, it's kind of where I learned the edges of my knowledge. Like I thought I was smart, but physics is a pretty challenging subject. And I didn't want to be in school anymore. I didn't want to do a master's degree or a PhD. I thought I was going to be a writer. I mean, the first thing I did was I moved out of my parents and I was living in this studio apartment. I was trying to figure it out. I was doing the activism thing, going across town and telling people where their food comes from, with the defendant quite a bit. I was watching movies, trying to write. I didn't really have anything figured out.
What'd you do to earn money? You can't get any money out of activism necessarily. So what'd you do to actually for work after you graduated?
I had a job. It was called the search engine analyst, and it sounds fancier than it is. But the way it worked back then is you'd log into this website that Google hosted, and they would give you things that people put in for like search queries. So if like someone typed in ketchup, you'd get two websites, and you'd have to say which one is a better website for ketchup. It was part-time. I didn't interact with anyone.
Any other jobs?
I valeted for a bit that year, but nothing until I started at Merrill.
Now you say you started at Merrill. When did you start at Merrill Lynch?
It was like a year after I graduated, December of 2013.
You eventually moved in with the defendant.
A couple of years after that, yeah, in 2015.
Prior to moving in with her, there was kind of an incident which, I'd like you to tell the jury about, in terms of it moved you to go to Merrill Lynch. So why did you go to Merrill Lynch?
Well, it's definitely wasn't part of the plan. Like I said, I was trying to be a writer. I was doing vegan activism. Investments were not at the top of mind for me. What happened was sugar happened. So
What sugar?
Sugar was a dog that lived with Iwana. He was a Jack Russell, older. I think I want to say but she adopted him like when he was 9 or 10 years old. And I mean, he's the reason why I ended up at Merrill.
How does a dog named Sugar end up leading you to work at Merrill Lynch, an investment company?
So Sugar got sick. That's what happened. I was over at her house, most days of the week. Like I was working this job that was online, so like I set my own hours. I'd bike over to her house. I didn't have a car, and when I was there, like I spent a lot of time with the dogs. Like she had two, Philly and Sugar. I was the one that took them on walks. Like if there was a party, I was the one in the corner hanging out with the dogs. And it was September of that year. Sugar got he got sick, so he just started hiding under chairs. Like when he went to the backyard, he'd hide behind the pool pump. I told Iwana that we should take him to go see a vet. But like between the two of us, we had maybe $50 like in our accounts, and we just put it off. He ended up passing that weekend, and I remember the phone call. She called me like 10 in the morning. Like I want to say it was a Saturday for some reason. And like I'd overslept. Like I was in my studio apartment. I didn't have a bed frame. I was on the floor. And I remember picking up the phone, and she's just crying. And I make out that Sugar passed. Like I missed it because I'd overslept. But I knew I had to be over there, so I biked over. It was September. I was on I was like in Sunny Slope. She was on Bell Road. It's like 4 or 5 miles. So I biked the 4 or 5 miles. And I got there and, she's still crying. Like I go into the vet and we take Sugar's body, like we didn't have him cremated. And I drove us, like Sugar's body and her back to the mothership, if that's what we're calling it now. I drove us back in her car, and like that afternoon, we dug him a grave. Real hard thing to do in Phoenix. Like the ground is clay, like after you get past the first couple inches. So, me and her, we dug a grave together, like 3 or 4 feet down. And the way this connects is I remember, like, after we got him in there and buried him, like we went inside and we were like just telling stories about him to remember. Like he was a big jumper. Like he like jumped on the dining room table and like spilled water on her laptop and broke her laptop. Like we were telling these stories to just remember him. And I remember like realizing really clearly in that moment that this was going to keep happening. Neither one of us had money, but like life was going to keep happening. Like there was going to be more death. There was going to be more hardship, like unless something changed. And like I remember like that day, I promised her that like if any of the other animals like in our care got sick, like I'd take care of it and like money wouldn't be an issue. But I started looking for work. Like I got a job as a valet the next week, and then like within a couple months, I got a job at Merrill, working in the call center.
Now, people think Merrill Lynch, it's a big company, it's well known, it's rich. What was your job title at Merrill Lynch? What were you given?
Yeah, they called me investment specialist 1.
And I mean, it sounds like you're a specialist in investments. Is that accurate or consistent with the title itself?
Look, it was a call center job. They would have taken anyone with a pulse. The call that I got most was resetting passwords. Someone can't get into their account. They call in, I press the button for them, I tell them what it is, and like I walk them through the website. So like, if you have a college, you don't need a college degree for this. If you have a high school like degree, they would have hired you on.
How many people were in the call center with you doing that same kind of job?
Just on my floor, there were probably like 300 people.
When you were at Merrill Lynch, did you ever get into a promotion to something better than investment specialist 1?
No. So the whole 3 years I was there, I was investment specialist 1 the whole time. I applied for a couple of things, but I didn't get the roles.
Now, when you were at Merrill, at some point you learned about some customers who were doing very well with their trading. When was this?
This happened like probably my 2nd or 3rd year there. So I never got a promotion, but I worked my way into a different department. I was basically like tech support for the stock market. So if one of the other workers had a question about options or about borrowing, like they'd come to my group and we would do some math for them, like some basic algebra. And it was like the beginning of 2016. One of the advisors who handled accounts that were like over $1 million, he came over to me and said, "Help me figure out what's going on in this guy's account." And we looked at it together, and the first thing we saw was the guy had turned $250,000 into $6 million in 4 years. I didn't think much of it. Like I told the guy, he's like, "Oh yeah, he's doing what looks like reverse conversions." The textbooks say you don't make a ton of money this way. It's supposed to be like risk free, so you don't get a ton of return. And I didn't think about it, but it was like January that year that I got introduced to this customer, and there were lots of customers trading like this, but that was the first time I got introduced to it, and I actually it didn't click for me. I like saw it. We had this conversation, and then it just passed by. Like I think I was focused on, like, me and you want a summer vacation, so like every summer we Like we took a road trip.
Now, were you actually, did you have your own customers or clients, people who walked in and you gave advice to?
No, not at all.
Can you describe for me this reverse conversion strategy in a way that, everybody can comprehend?
Yeah, I can try. So it's like not a secret strategy. It's really well documented. It's been around since the 70s. Read about it in a textbook. I don't know if you're supposed to, but it's like real well documented. And the basic way it works is you sell a stock that you don't own. And I've explained this like a couple of times in the last 6 years. And so some people get hung up on that. And so the way I explain it is, like, say your friend lets you borrow their car. Selling something you don't own would be like selling your friend's car. And he let you borrow it for the weekend. By the time he's back, you got to buy another car to have your friend's car, so you can give it back to him. So that's how it starts. You borrow this thing that you don't own, a stock, and with reverse conversions, what you do is on the same day you buy it back in the options market. It's just a little bit of profit. One of the stocks this worked on was like a company called Sears that's bankrupt now. You could sell it for $10, buy it back for $9, and you make $1 of profit.
Now, the reverse conversion strategy, you say you're borrowing the stock, and that's kind of a hard thing to contemplate, selling something that you've borrowed. But in terms of the borrowing, I mean, where do you get the money from?
It comes from Merrill, so that's where most of the money comes from. So like in this example with Sears, you do have to put up some money of your own. In this example, you'd have to put up $1, and then Merrill lets you borrow like the other $9 that's getting traded. So 90% of the money is borrowed through Merrill, and like this is all normal. Like that's how their business runs. They're very used to doing this.
So reverse conversions, you said, are like known or understood. Is it a legal strategy or prohibited in that respect?
No, not at all. I mean, we tell customers, like if a customer called in and said, "Can I trade reverse conversions with you guys?" We would walk them through it, explain it, and say, "This is exactly how you do it." Nothing about it was illegal.
Did you have your own trading account at Merrill Lynch to execute your own trades?
I did. So I'd been working there for like 3 years. I'd moved back in with my parents to save some money. So I had some money, and I had a trading account just like everyone else on the floor did.
Speaking of your parents, what did they think about you working at Merrill Lynch?
They weren't happy about it. So they said it's haram. So in Islam, at least the version that they believe, any kind of gambling is forbidden, and the stock market is seen just as gambling.
Okay. And reverse conversions, therefore, are not sort of analogous to like an insider trading situation.
No. So I'm not a lawyer. Like that's way above my pay grade. It's way above like any pay grade I've ever had. But one of the first things they teach you when you get hired at Merrill is what insider trading actually is. They drill it into you. And the way I was taught was that insider trading is if you have important information and that information is secret. So like if you know that, we're about to go to war before everyone else does, or if you know that SpaceX is about to buy Tesla, that's insider trading. This wasn't a secret. We would tell customers, like if they called and asked about